5 years, 10 years ago, you build a dashboard, you're the company's hero. Now you build a dashboard and you're just another analyst who doesn't understand the greater context of the business. You've got some candidates who might be spending 40 hours doing 10 take homes to get no traction. That becomes demoralizing really quickly as well. This idea that candidates need to be thinking on the spot off their top of their head and they can't leverage the internet during an interview process is also antiquated. I mean, we live in a world where I don't know the answer, I Google it. If I don't know the answer, I ask ChatGPT.
Pier, welcome to the Alooba Objective Hiring Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Tim, thanks for having me, actually. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I'm pumped to speak to you. We're thrilled to have you on board. One area I'd love to kick off with is a bit of a curiosity that I've found over the years in working in the kind of data recruitment space. So let me lay it out for you to get your thoughts on it. So I must have spoken to maybe 1,000 analytics leaders over the past 6 years. And these are leaders who spend their day helping businesses make data-driven decisions in product, in sales, in marketing, in operations. They're like deeply embedded in this way of making data with decisions. And yet I'd say probably 80% of them, when it comes to hiring and making hiring decisions, they abandon a lot of that kind of data-driven decision-making and go for a very intuitive gut feel-based approach. Have you seen this pattern? Can you kind of explain why it might happen? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, 100%. I think I've seen that pattern. I mean, I'm probably even guilty of it myself. I think, ultimately when humans are just biased creatures in my mind, we like the person we're talking to, we're more than likely to refer them forward. I think there's an element for sure that come in there. I also think that it's hard to quantify a lot of the things that we're looking for in the people in this space. I think it used to be easier to quantify it. If I go back 10 years ago, oh, can you use SQL? Oh, great. Do you know Python? Oh, wow, amazing. Right away, you're already ahead of the curve. But now those two skill sets are kind of mainstream. And so the things that you're looking for are more like the intangibles of how do you think? How do you communicate? How do you relate to the team? Can you handle change and incomplete requirements? And so to me, that's somewhat a little bit harder, especially with the tools that we have at hand or the legacy systems that exist from our recruiting. That I think nowadays it's just you have to use your gut more, and there's less data to say, like, how do you say, oh, this person will handle adversity really well? With the way that the system is set up now, with the way that we look at the interview process, you just go into an interview, you chat for 45 minutes. There's no real data that comes back out of that from a standard historically, the way we used to interview. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm guilty of that too. And we shy away from that data-driven approach.
That's a really interesting lens you've added there. So basically part of what you're saying is the basic technical skills almost being commoditized. So everyone's on a similar playing field. It's not a distinguishing factor anymore. Is it also maybe then a maturing of the market that now we are thinking about more specific things in candidates rather than just a simple technical test?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, so in Europe, the candidates, I have, put a job out for an entry-level role, looking for someone with, maybe a year of experience, something like that. They all have a master's degree. I mean, at a prior role, we were looking for 4 interns. Interns are quite a big item here in Europe. We hired 4 of them. They all had masters. One of them had a PhD. It's kind of the market is saturated in that space, and the overqualification of skill sets in the data science world. But I think that, or even in analytics, to me, the big differentiator is exactly that now. You put a role up on the internet here and you get 250 candidates within 24 hours. How do you differentiate? I mean, yeah, you can do those SQL and like Python tests, and yeah, you can do case studies, but with the invention of AI now, those are even more easy and easier to do. We don't expect people to be experts in anything specifically, but what has remained constant, in my opinion, is a lack of data literacy within the organization, a lack of true clear requirements, ambiguity across what we're trying to achieve, et cetera. So, and the pressure on the data team is higher than ever. Again, 5 years, 10 years ago, you build a dashboard, you're the company's hero. Now you build a dashboard and you're just another analyst who doesn't understand the greater context of the business. And so like that also has matured as well as the expectations, which is great in my opinion.
Yeah, that is a good thing, because I remember the kind of slightly earlier days of the first, maybe not the first, but a wave of kind of AI machine learning projects 10 years ago. My sense was when I spoke to people is there's a lot of money being spent with very little actual tangible benefit, which hopefully we're past that kind of growth curve or what have you. So maybe we are, or maybe not. Uh, but yeah, hopefully we're thinking about the candidates then in a more mature sense. So then you're saying that the types of things we would now evaluate and care about are inherently a bit more subjective, a bit less easy to measure. So it's only fair in a sense that we would use more intuition rather than a data-driven hiring approach, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mature organizations have a way of quantifying what is good communication versus what is not good communication. But I think, that those are typically the organizations that are larger or have, the capital to invest in those sorts of those things. I mean, if, you look at a startup here, 100 employees where they're making up processes as they go along. I mean, they have no real way of, evaluating between multiple candidates about what is communication. They often rely on the hiring manager's gut instinct for who will be a fit for the team from a cultural perspective. So I think you kind of take the data, definitely take the data out of it. Uh, in that space. Unfortunately, I think that's the part that we need to figure out how to quantify that, because ultimately that is the make or break. You go and talk to a candidate, you really like them, you think they're going to be a great fit. Technically, they're fine, no challenges, but they come in and they can't write an email without aggravating somebody, or they can't, run a meeting the right way. And then you realize that investment, especially here in Europe, is a 3-month commitment. So what I mean by that is when you hire somebody, there's a 3-month notice period. And so you have to wait 3 months for them to, resign from their job, start with you. You give them 3 to 6 months to kind of integrate into the organization. And if they're not the right fit, you've lost a year. And so that person they were trying to recruit a year ago, you have to start over again. And it's another year. So one bad hire can cost you easily 15 months of lost productivity. So it's an expensive, it's a very expensive mistake if you do it the incorrect way. And I think that right now we're relying too much on gut, and we are making those mistakes when we do that hiring.
I feel like one way to make the evaluation of these subjective things a little bit more objective is to have at least some kind of scoring rubric. So let's say, for example, communication skills. It's probably going to be something you're looking for in every single candidate, irrespective of the role. I feel like there's a difference between just getting to the end of the interview and going yes or no versus, well, here's how we're defining good communication. Here's like a 5 out of 5. Here's a 1 out of 5. Here's specific ways they might communicate that would be indicators they're 5 or 1. Like at least if we boxed it in that way and got people to evaluate in an interview, I feel like we'd make it more accurate. What do you reckon?
Absolutely. I mean, for sure. I mean, you've seen different organizations, the fad of the last couple of years I've noticed is the STAR system, the situation, I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, situation, something action, something result or something. Anyway, so wish I had covered that on top of my head, but that became the new mainstream way to figure out how someone can storytell and communicate what they actually did and the task and what they achieved and all those elements. But then again, like everything else, that became a mainstream way. So now everyone's prepared to answer questions in that format. So I think there's also this element of every time we introduce a new way of trying to evaluate something, people do master it and then know how to gamify it in a certain way. But yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. A very mature company would look at that and say, okay, on a 1 to 10 scale or 1 to 5 scale, whatever it happens to be, how do you rate this candidate? And you should. I mean, I think that's just the only way to do it. I've worked in many organizations as well where they focus on different areas. So you might have one interview that's focused on overcoming adversity, and there's questions around that. There's another one that's talking about how to navigate stakeholder conversations. But again, you're leaving one individual to ask those questions around that topic and to make their assessment of, can Tim handle adversity? Well, I think he can. Okay, great. But maybe 5 other people would say, actually, no, Tim cannot. But it's very suggestive. the flip side of it, and I'm speaking a lot here, is, I mean, you do these panel interviews, but then there's also a lot of studies that show that if you put someone in front of 5 people, it's a very intimidating situation also. Are you really getting the best out of them? And how often would that happen where this candidate talks to 5 people at once and has to answer questions, right? It's not a common occurrence in the business world.
Yeah, that must be one of the fundamental flaws with the way hiring's done is the process itself doesn't really mirror or reflect the job. The closest is in technical roles is probably that kind of take home task or project that's, normally that's sort of quite correlated to the real job, especially when it ends with some kind of presentation back to that audience. But even then, it's still a little bit contrived. I feel like interviews are a long way off real work. Again, there's that pressure element. There's also just that kind of mask that both sides have on where you're not really being yourself. It's like this weird charade, this act. So I really am fascinated to see where we'll get to in 5, 10, 15 years. Like, is there a way that we could get someone's true behavior sooner? Because you really only discover it after like your first night out together at drinking. That's when I notice a lot of the reality comes in. You know what I mean?
I think the process is inherently flawed and definitely in the recruiting process. And I think, you touched on it right here with the case study. Again, 5 years ago, there weren't many case studies that were being sent out. And then all of a sudden now there's a huge phase where everybody was sending out a case study. The challenge is that they're like, oh, just send out the case study. It's a low cost to the company. There's no, oh, like the resume seems interesting. Let's send a case study. The candidate then spends however many hours, say 4, 5, 6 hours, some spend 10, 15 hours, right? Preparing for a case study that then gets put through maybe an automated check that fails, or is a lot of investment of time for something that is not necessarily a commitment on the company's side. So I'm also, cautious about that. And now with the advent of invention of AI, I mean, you can just upload it to ChatGPT, ask it to give you the answers, kind of tweak it a little bit to make it look like it's not AI driven, and there's your case study. So are you really getting something out of it? A couple of years ago, we started doing live coding. Part of that was you spend an hour together, so there's not much more than 1 hour commitment. It was, here's a task, how would you go? Obviously, it's a little bit more pressure because someone's watching you while you're coding, but try to create an environment where it was more like a collaboration, where we're solving a problem together, we're working on it together, and to really see how they ask questions and how they challenge that. But again, every process, pros and cons to both. Live coding, very stressful. Some people said it's kind of an anxious inducing environment, which I also get. They'd much prefer to work on their own. They do work on their own day to day. How often do you have to work with your manager on your shoulder? So pros and cons, but it's an evolving space for sure.
Yeah, there's so many things like that in hiring that are just trade-offs. There isn't necessarily one better or worse way to do it often. And I know if I can remember back to the last job I had in an office, if someone came across to my desk and said, hey, can you just chop this SQL code for me? I think I'd lose the ability to use my fingers. That's how clumsy I'd become. I couldn't do a select star, I don't think, with someone staring over my shoulder. That level of pressure would get to me. But then, yeah, as you say, the take-home test is just such a huge time suck and very hard to compare as well, because some candidates might spend 3 hours, another one spends 15. Then how do you compare those results really?
Absolutely. And most people aren't applying to one job anymore. I mean, that's the other thing too. Applying for a job is easier than ever. Most candidates can apply to 5 to 10 jobs in a day, if they're, especially depending on what career level that they're at. If you're sending 5 to 10 take home tests because it's an easy step for the company to weed out who's interested, you've got some candidates who might be spending 40 hours doing 10 take homes to get no traction. That becomes demoralizing really quickly as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's such a tricky market at the moment, I think, as well. And you touched on candidates using AI sometimes to take those take-home tests. We've certainly seen candidates optimize or create CVs using AI. What about from your end? Have you started to dabble in using any AI on the company or the hiring side? And are there any things you're thinking of using AI for in terms of hiring?
Not specifically at this stage. I think there are many things that I'd like to see what we can do with it, especially around, um, especially around kind of creating more realistic scenarios in the moment. I think one of the challenges that we have when you are having conversations with somebody, a lot of the times, like I'm sure everyone's seen this data set, but there's a New York or I think it's a New York City bike rental case study that it became like everyone was using it for a while. Before you know it, you're like, okay, it's the same data everywhere. I think that's been the part where I think there'll be some use cases there to create a scenario that no one is familiar with so that you can truly work together, right? I think that's part of, there's ways to leverage AI to create what would be a similar day-to-day environment within the organization, versus like this. And that's been, I think, a big challenge too. If you hear all these candidates that they talk about, oh, I did this boot camp, I'm now a certified data scientist. And it's a lot of what they experience in those courses is very good for the fundamentals, but that data is so clean and they nudge you towards a certain outcome, versus the reality is of our day-to-day is that our data is dirty, that this new integration did not work well, that we are solving something for the first time because otherwise it would already be automated and running as a dashboard or a report or a tool. So how do you use AI to potentially create those situations where it's a similar outcome and then work with the candidate in that moment if we do live coding, or so that they can't just use AI to kind of cheat, if you want to say cheat, right, from a fairness perspective. But in my opinion, I mean, we've also this idea that candidates need to be thinking on the spot off their top of their head and they can't leverage the internet during an interview process is also antiquated. I mean, we live in a world where I don't know the answer, I Google it. If I don't know the answer, I ask ChatGPT. Like it's all at the end of the day, these are tools that are available to us. Why would I not let a candidate use them for the process of the interview as well?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And you mentioned cheating and inverted commas. How do you personally view candidates' use of AI? Is there anything in the hiring process that's off limits that you feel like, oh, I'd rather they not use ChatGPT for X, or you think it's completely fair game?
Yeah, to me, it's like, look, if you notice it and you can see it when someone's looking at a screen above them, or if they're typing the question to see what answer they get back, again, it's like you either know it or you don't. And I think that's part of the thing is that, let's say I talk to somebody about using a neural network for certain analysis, right? And they go, yeah, I know what that is. And they read off a pretty scripted answer. Well, then you kind of know that they don't know what that is, right? Or you say, okay, how would you apply it? And what happens when this happens? Or like, there's, when you're having a conversation with somebody and truly spitballing the problem, uh, then you end up in a position where you'll know if they know it or not. And I think that's part of it. So if they want to use chat, I use it too. I mean, I use it to get an understanding about a certain context about a company or thing, or how would I use this? But then how do you that actually implement it is based on my knowledge and my skill set. So yeah, I think to me, there should be no limits. And if you create limits, then you create opportunities for cheating and lying. And I think in this case, why would you create that? Of course, they're going to use it. So let's just embrace it and figure out how they use it and what they can do with it.
Yeah, I think that's the most mature response, because why would you want to in any way discourage candidates from using a groundbreaking bit of technology that could make them like 10x more efficient on the job? Would it make sense? You'd be sending the wrong message, I think. I guess it's just because the technology has developed so rapidly that it's kind of broken so many hiring steps that we don't quite know what to do with it now. As you said, like take-home test, they can probably get by on that. An online test, yet the CV now is dust as far as I'm hearing in terms of how relevant or accurate it is. And so now we're just struggling to come to terms with, how are we actually going to evaluate people? How are we going to choose out of these 500 applicants who is the one we need to hire? And so I guess companies are just grappling with that. Let me throw one particular scenario at you, which I had recently, and I thought, I'd rather they not have used ChatGPT. So it was part of the application process for some of our sales roles. One of the questions we asked them was, imagine it's day one for you at Alooba. What are the 3 things you need from us to give you the best chance of being successful in your role? And so it's a very personal question where I wanted their opinion as an individual. I didn't give a shit what the LLM said on that particular day. But so many candidates had clearly just whacked it through ChatGPT and give us the pasted answer, which was just annoying because I didn't have the bit of information that I needed. What about for something like that? Are there any bits that you would suggest not using it if you were a candidate, let's say.
Yeah, but I mean, so that is a data point for you, right? So that tells you that in the case where they have to think on their own for something that is personal, that they're still going to use something that is inherently not personal. I mean, although granted, now you can make ChatGPT know a lot more about you and can give it a personal spin, but um, yeah, I mean, like, again, that's a data point for you. That to me would look at that and go, okay, that's a pretty scripted answer, probably not the fit for us. Is that how they're going to operate here? Or are they just, or is that just for them nerves or not sure what to put or unsure if they can be their true self or things like that as well? Like, I mean, that's the part that you as a hiring manager need to evaluate if that looks like. Um, no, I mean, for me, I think I always look at this as it's a data point either way. So I don't think there's any, you're right that I think anything where it's a personal question of like, what do you enjoy about your job? If they put that through an AI, I think then you can see how the answer, how it's formatted. But I'm also cognizant that some people are not great at writing. And so they might just type a bunch of buzzword or words that are important to them into, an AI language, LLM, and then get it to rewrite it for them as well. And then it looks a little bit more polished, which I think is a lot of the use cases that most people use these things for nowadays, right? So cognizant of that, but no, ultimately, I think for me, the only thing would be, hey, don't use it when it's asking, like, said a personal thing about you, when it's talking about your ambitions, your goals, your beliefs, your values, and things like that. Don't just get a generic answer out of it. But if you use it from the perspective of help me reframe this in a more positive light, or help me use words that'll make it more cohesive, or things like that, then again, that's fine. But no, for me, I believe no limits barred, especially around that interview process. I think we get more into trouble when we talk about data privacy if you're ingesting company data into it, but that's a whole different story.
I think even in that interview process where you mentioned, like, if you had a candidate using it, kind of becomes fairly obvious. And I would have thought for a candidate, if you actually knew what you were talking about, it would be more difficult to be running ChatGPT and having an interview at the same time. I would find that cognitively very difficult to read the output of AI, put that back into my words and give an answer rather than just giving the answer. But I wonder if the meta thing here is that if in general in hiring, I feel like if companies and candidates could be more brutally honest and transparent earlier on, the better the hiring process would run. I feel like this is another example of that, where it's like, you can use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you want. I'm now more interested in the next levels, how you're using it and why you're using it. Let's now investigate your prompts. Is your prompt good? And you can almost just get past that superficial first layer. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. But I think that also speaks to the maturity of the people on both sides of that conversation. I think companies feel overwhelmed with the hiring process. You have, like I said, you might have 250 candidates apply for a data analyst role. How am I making the right decision? The cost of making the wrong one is so high. So, and oftentimes the people who are doing the hiring don't often get to hire very often. It's not like they're professional hirers, especially we talk about data and analytics individuals. They don't necessarily, most of the time, most individuals don't have the highest caliber soft skills, right? They're technical people for a reason. They went down this path for a reason. So they don't like interviews to begin with, and they definitely don't like running interviews as part of the process. It's a very different vibe. So, you're asking someone to kind of in a way say, look, let's be real. Let's be honest. We like you. You like us. Let's see how this works together to treat this as a real relationship. No, a lot of the times is, well, let's not show that we're too keen because we don't want them to negotiate with us too hard at the end. And then the candidate goes, well, let's not show that I'm too keen because then they'll know that they can have me for free. And, and then you got this dance that you're doing when in reality, it's like, let's be grownups about this. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if this is a fit for both sides and truly how we would work from day one. But that takes a maturity both from the candidate, from experience, and the company as well from their processes. And I don't think we're there yet in many cases.
I feel like now that we've described that, the onus should really be on the company to set that tone, especially if we're talking about individual contributor candidates who are maybe in their first, second, third year. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch to expect them to have that level of maturity, but the company should have almost company quality recruitment, even if each hiring manager maybe isn't that experienced.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And the companies do need to set the tone. I've interviewed at companies where, at my level, where most of the interviews are conversations now, and rightfully so, right? Like we're talking strategy, we're talking about how we would build teams and how do we develop people. It's not necessarily, hey, here's how do you do a select from statement, right? I think there's elements now so there's more of that. But still, I've interviewed at some companies where it's incredibly rigid. Like they ask a question, we need the answer in this format. This is how we're going to do it. And then you realize that actually, if that's the way that you interview, is that the way that you're going to operate as an organization, right? And so I think that's part of it too or is that just the way that they are interviewing because they are then using a scoring template in the background to say, okay, a 4 is a 4. We know for sure that that 4 is accurate because we followed our strict process. And again, like I said earlier, pros and cons, right? That might be good for them to make an evaluation of me, but then I'm walking away going, wow, if that's the way that we're going to interact with each other, then I'm not sure if I'm interested. So it's kind of both sides.
So the hiring process itself is an advertisement or an anti-advertisement in some cases for the business and the role and the people involved.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be, right? It has to be nowadays as well. Like to me, it's a huge it's a huge red flag when you start jumping jobs too many times in a span. I mean, it's not like our parents' generation where they worked at one company for 35 years and retired. Now, yeah, you're jumping around maybe every 3, 4, 5 years max. In Europe, it's more like for a while there's every 2 years. So you have to move to kind of make that career progression. But then you start to get this reputation as a job hopper. So what you try to avoid is making a mistake. I don't want to join an organization to realize in month 3 that this isn't what I thought I signed up for. Why am I here? Or what is this sort of culture that I've signed up for that I don't believe that I'm part of? And then having to switch again cost both sides a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy. So for me, yeah, it's more than ever now. It's a dance on both sides. It's not just please hire me. It's now let's see if there's a fit for both of us together to make this work.
The way you framed it then makes me think that I feel like one of the unlocks in hiring then in the next few years might be the creation of new data sets to make better decisions. Because at the moment, at that initial application stage, we have a CV and an application, and someone's reviewing that. But the CV is just someone's opinion about themselves, very subjective. It's now apparently even less accurate than it used to be because people are whacking it through ChatGPT. It's now optimized to the job. So they all look amazing. This is what I'm hearing constantly. And so from the company side, they've got very little to go on at that initial stage. And then, as you say, from the candidate side, once they go to the hiring process, sometimes you're still really none the wiser. You've had a bunch of interviews with people who've bombarded you with questions. You've maybe had 5 minutes to ask your own questions, but you've really like, what is this job actually going to be? I feel like often people are still signing contracts without truly knowing what's about to happen. I can also think from personal experience, some of the shit shows I've walked into in my earlier careers without maybe knowing what questions to ask. So I wonder if we just need better data and what would that data be? Like even hypothetically, what would a company love to know about a candidate? What would a candidate love to know about a company? Have you got any thoughts?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head here, but yeah, I mean that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, again, you hit something right there that's happened to me. Right, you join a company like, yeah, we're using Looker to do this, and we're really established. We've got a modern data stack, blah blah, blah. And then you realize, yeah, okay, you come in, you join, you've got a modern data stack, but you're not leveraging it the right way, and your data is garbage in whatever you're putting in, and you're not really using Looker. You just kind of have it there, but you're not actually using it. Like, so it's kind of like there's always this element of you have to weed out what the truths are and what the stretched truths. I don't think anyone ever lies in an interview process because it's obvious when you get in, but everyone stretches a little bit in terms of like, yeah, our team is really well and mature, and then you kind of come in, you realize actually the team is quite junior and they don't understand. Like, so I don't know how to solve that. I think that's just a matter of similar to the interview process. What I often advise the people that I coach in this space is, if you do get an offer at the end of this process, if you do get an offer, ask for an extra call with the hiring manager to ask them a ton of questions, right? How will you manage me, and how will you do this, and show me your tech stack, because at that point you've got an offer on the table. Like, it's not like, you have to do your due diligence. And I think a lot of people don't. They feel, oh, if I don't sign the offer today, they'll renege it from me, and I won't be able to work here. When reality is I would really appreciate, even if a junior analyst came and said, I'd love to sit down with you for an hour and ask you some questions. That would, in my mind, be like, wow, this person's really putting a lot of thought into this to make sure this is the right fit. But I think a lot of people are worried that, oh, that's another touch point where I might slip up and they might realize that they don't like me anymore and they'll renege my offer. But data point wise, data set wise, I don't know. I think in this space, we're also seeing there's a lot more information about every company's tech stack on the internet. You can see a lot of public, a lot of these analysts and are some releasing things publicly on, whether it's on like Stack Overflow or things like that. You can kind of see some things, but it's never, again, a truly complete data set.
That's a great suggestion and shout I hadn't heard before then. So you basically add your own step once you have the contract in your hands, because then you've got leverage. And hey, that'd be a pretty psychopathic company if they reneged at that point. And surely that would tell you everything you want to know about that company. And you've almost dodged a bullet if they do that, right?
Exactly, right. And you're only asking for an hour's time. Hey, you're asking for an hour to ask 20 questions and whatever it happens to be. No, obviously don't come in and say, what's your promotion process look like? Although that might be a shared question, right? But think about. I think it's a good opportunity to do that, and good due diligence on top of that, especially if you haven't had the chance. If they're giving you 5 minutes to ask your questions at the end of every interview, most of the time you're not really getting into the depth. Like you said, they've interviewed you. Can you flip the script? I think now we're seeing a lot of companies are actually asking the candidate, or it's been happening to me in some instances where they will ask me up front if I have questions at the start of the interview, and we'll use that first 20 or 30 minutes to go down that path. But again, I don't know if I want to compare where I'm at in my career and say that that's a market trend either, right? So it all really depends on the level of career.
I wonder if you've heard from your mentees any feedback around when they've done this extra step at the end and had the opportunity to ask the hiring manager questions. I wonder if the kind of truth serum comes out then. Like, I wonder if the hiring managers become a little bit less on guard and they're just being more honest with the candidate. I'm not sure if you've heard any feedback along those lines.
I haven't, but in the times that I've done it, I found that I definitely get more, because by that point they've, it's like that. It's like the I love you has come out, or the I like you has come out. So now everyone's a little bit more like not as guarded anymore. And so I think there is a little bit more about, hey, we like you. Here's a bunch of information. Let's help you make your decision. So I think it's been positive in the times that I've done it in the past. Again, you don't always get but you can still be lied to in some way. But I think, again, it's an opportunity, depending on which questions you ask. If you ask similar questions in different ways, you can kind of get an idea as to what it looks like. But definitely the guards are more down by that point, which is also great.
And I feel like, again, for companies and candidates, it's almost tempting to keep your guard up and play your cards close to your chest. But I feel like that's such a short run strategy, because what could be worse than hiring someone or joining a role and realizing in the first week, oh my God, or what mistake have I made here? Okay. Because that's just going to be, if you overpitch a role and oversell it and the candidate comes in, they're going to quit in 1 week. And as you say, in a market like Germany, you just lost half the year. So then start the recruitment process again. Someone's got 3 months notice period. That is a disaster. So I feel like surely it's in your best interest, even if it's a bit uncomfortable to do it, just to really get the facts away in the interview process itself.
Yeah, that, to me, again, we talked about maturity earlier. Ego plays a part. I think a lot of companies we have to showcase that we've got it together, that everything is super great here, and that they love it. And in reality, I think a lot of candidates, if you came to me and said, hey, Pierre, I have this job for you. You can take over this team. They're fantastic. They're all high performers. Everything's sorted. There's no problems. I'd be like, oh, okay, that seems boring. Like, all I can do is wreck it, is what you're telling me. Like, you're already super thrilled with them. Like, why would I join that? Right? Like, versus if you come and say, hey, we've got these problems and we need to solve for this. And we're missing this and we have huge gaps and this is a problem. Yeah, okay, now you've got me. Now I'm interested. Now I know that's not for everybody, but to me, it's like, okay, now as a leader, I can come in and help make something better, help turn it into a high performing team, help do something, not just, hey, be a babysitter and keep this team happy. And I think that's the same case with many analysts. People want to come in and do valuable work that has high impact, that is changing something for the better. And so I think companies need to move away from this idea of everything's fantastic. We're fantastic. We love it. We're a family. No, there are challenges. Our data's not good. We have these products that we're building. It is time sensitive. And then get the candidate that comes in that is excited by that, not just, and I think that's part of it. By being truthful, you're going to also weed out someone's like, look, I don't really want to work in a time crunched environment. I much prefer when it's more calm for me. So I'm going to opt out of this process, right? This is not the role for me. And someone else was like, no, this is for me. I love this. This is where I thrive. Okay, well, welcome aboard. And then you get the candidate that is going to fit the role of what you need versus this rainbows and unicorns. And then everyone's lying to each other.
I think this is one of the benefits of running a startup, because it's such a specific environment that you have to be like very honest and transparent from the get-go, the ups and the downs, because probably 99% of people would hate it. But there's this 1% segment of people who would love it, and for them it's the perfect job. And so if you don't get that clear from the get-go, it's just, you're going to have a horrible time. Everyone's going to have horrible times. The hiring company, the hiring manager, the candidate, they join, they're like, oh, there's no documentation. There's no process. There's no this, no this. Like, where's my XYZ? XYZ doesn't exist. So you do it.
And the flip side, the other way, right? Like, oh, I'd love to join, or Microsoft, or let's just say I'd like to join Facebook or Meta and work for them. Okay, great. And then you realize you join and you're only working on a small subset of a piece of their product that they have. And that's all you can do. But I have an idea for how we integrate with with WhatsApp. And they're like, that's not your jurisdiction. Stay in your lane, do your thing. And, I think that's also the flip side of it. Some people love to be able to touch everything and do everything and push their own code to production within 12 minutes. And if that's what you want, don't go join a 1,000-person company. Don't go join a Meta with their checks and balances in place, right? I mean, imagine going to Commonwealth Bank and telling them that you can change the code in 24 minutes. Like, good luck with that. That's not happening without a formal review process. So I think every job has, again, and if you're not honest about that, then you're right. You end up with a candidate that joins day one and says, I want to change this. And they say, did it go through this process? No. Okay, well, come back to us in 6 months after we do the next prioritization process, right?
There's, I think, a sense of inflation then on both sides. Like, the companies are inherently marketing their role above and beyond what it is. And then the candidates kind of marketing themselves and bullshitting a bit on the CV. I wonder if then maybe both sides fear that if they were really honest, then people would look at it and go, oh no, your job looks much worse than these other 50 jobs I'm looking at. They're telling me everything's amazing. You're telling me some things are amazing and some things are shit. And so it's almost like we're stuck in this, on both sides, this, in economics, you call it like a bad equilibrium of sort of misinformation and almost exaggerations that we need to get out of somehow.
But you also got that publicly, every company, especially if you're looking at your competitors, when they put job descriptions up, you're looking at your competitor across the street and saying, oh, wow, they don't have their, business together. Look at those guys. They're saying that they've got problems with their data quality. Wow, what a mess. I think there's also part of that, right? You're putting a public persona out there of like, yeah, we're hiring for this. We're good, as well. So I think that's definitely part of it. It's the reality is that everyone has data quality issues. Everyone has problems. Everyone, like when you go to these, here in Europe, we're really big on these meetups and these round tables where you sit with 8 or 10 other, data leaders from the city or the country. And you realize very quickly that everyone has the same problems. Everyone has the same challenges. Everyone's struggling for the same exact things. But we all publicly say we're doing great until we go behind closed doors in a safe environment and then actually realize that not so good. It's not so good here, not so good there.
I feel like then we need sort of like a company therapist or something, someone who's seen behind the curtain and has spoken to people or candidates or companies, and they know the reality, and they just need to Say, hey, come on, seriously. Nobody's that perfect, so don't worry about it. Just relax. Just be honest.
Yeah. But and I think also on the candidate side, right? The market is so competitive that if I'm not this ideal perfect candidate, I don't get this job. And I think it's the same. I mean, you go back to the university application process, right? Do you have I can't remember this scoring system in Australia, but like in Canada, it's like, do you have a 98% average? Did you also do 17 extracurricular activities? Are you volunteering in 6 countries? Like, if you're not doing that, then don't call us. And I think part of the jobs here too is like, oh, do you have this master's degree? Do you have 15 years of experience in some language that was invented 10 years ago? Like it's almost impossible to meet the requirements, but as a result, people stretch the truth and expand they do so. Yeah. It's a dance. It's a nice little relationship dance at the start.
And it feels like we're in this weird scenario where, from what I'm hearing, companies are getting inundated with all these CVs. Candidates are seeing each job ad on LinkedIn and going, oh, wow, there's already been 1,000 applicants in 2 days. Are you kidding me? I thought I had to apply to 10 jobs. Now I feel like I have to apply to 100 to give myself a chance of getting a job because my conversion rate, my odds of getting the job have just gone down, which is then causing everyone to apply for more. And we're in this kind of weird, vicious loop thing. And I'm hearing that a lot of companies are saying, I have too many good candidates on paper based on their CV. So many of them seem like a good match. But then they're kind of getting the candidates into interview and they're finding out that it's not as good as it seems on paper. It seems like that process is kind of broken. Is there some other tool, some other data set, some other way that you think we could be doing screening in those early stages to decide who to interview that could be better than just a CV and an application?
I think there's elements where we could get the candidate, especially nowadays, if you think about how easy it is to record yourself doing, speaking or doing something, right? There's an element where you could do something like here's a question, answer this question, record yourself on the screen. I went through this process earlier in the year where it's where basically they gave me a question that I had to answer in less than 3 minutes, and I could try to record myself 3 times. So it's a platform that they built themselves, obviously, I guess, or a tool maybe they're using in the market. And so, yeah, the first time you go to answer this question, you make a mistake and you flub and then you start over again. But by the third time, you've got your answer down pat. You also had something like 10 minutes to record yourself once you hit that window. So you could still do a little research if you wanted to. You still had a little bit of time to get your thoughts down on paper and do it. But I think that there's an element there where for example, that 3 minutes is a much faster way of scanning through maybe say 10 to 15 candidates as a hiring manager instead of having to schedule 10 to 15, 30 to 45-minute interviews. If you consider the 15 minutes before, the 15 minutes after, and now everyone's wasted an hour of their time, when in reality, you could easily wean out that candidate. Say, look, that resume looks great, but the way that they communicate, I don't see a fit for us, or the way that they thought about the problem is not at the level that we expect, or like whatever it happens to be. You at least get a little bit more insight in a small window that might help you make the next decision. Say, look, I'm unsure about this candidate, but I saw enough potential. Let's move them to the next stage. There's also that. So I think we can start to leverage some of the things that we have at our disposal that isn't just CV, interview, job offer. There could be some things in between that will reduce the time on both sides, but still create an opportunity. And I'll just say, like, your point is valid. Like, we're seeing when we put a job application up, I'm seeing about 150, 200 applications. When you start scanning through it, there's about 60 or 70 that you're like, wow, these are fantastic. Like, they look really good. And then you realize very quickly that out of those 70, you might have 5 that actually are able to communicate or think or logic the right way, or even understand the business. The amount of candidates that don't even spend 5 minutes researching what we do as a company, like little things like that, but by that point, I've invested 15, 20 hours of my time interviewing candidates to realize that I have maybe 2 or 3 that are good. Could I not have got to the 2 or 3 earlier on and then spent more time with them to figure out which of the 2 or 3 is actually a better fit for us? And a better fit for them. I would rather do that time than spend 20 hours on people that I'm never going to talk to again.
Yeah, I think anytime the market's balanced this way, which is very much in the favor of employers, normally that the screening step becomes a little bit more aggressive, like a little bit more effort for candidates. And so, yeah, that ends up being a one-way video interview, some kind of AI interview, a test, something like that. I'm sure companies will have to use, because otherwise you'll end up interviewing way too many candidates, because a CV ultimately just doesn't predict performance that well.
An AI interview would be quite interesting. I think we're close to that. I think the AI interview would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, the products are definitely emerging, and I think GPT, Claude are at a state where their ability to interpret answers and do grading and those kinds of things is pretty close to there. And in this kind of use case you're talking about, it might be a no-brainer, because it's not like it's, instead of doing all human interviews, it's just this in-between step where you're trying to get from X hundred applications to the higher touch, higher costs, higher value, higher signal interview with a human. So yeah, maybe as that intermediate screening layer, I suspect that will be the norm in the next year or so, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I'd love to chat to you about is your career coaching. And in particular, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you see as the biggest gap that like strong technical data candidates have to develop or overcome to get to that data leadership role, and how you help some of them bridge that gap.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking about that. I think that's, I mean, so the area that I focus on is helping data and analytics leaders create or develop that soft skill to take them to the next stage of their career. So I was thinking about this a lot, a few years ago, and I started to figure out that there was a pattern that we're now seeing largely for the first time in this space, people who have graduated with masters of data sciences or bachelors of, it used to be, yeah, you had software engineers and they were, buried in the back room working on and no one talked to them and no one saw them and they ran the back end, right? And now the expectation, especially in data and analytics, is that you're not only able to understand what the business is doing and the context of the business, but you're also able to be technical and to actually build your own data products and pieces like that. So what I've seen is we have these really incredibly smart individuals who do a great job of being individual contributors, and yet the companies aren't mature enough yet. Some are, like Facebook and Google and the big one, the tech companies, to have a high level individual contributor that really can showcase the value that they drive. Most companies don't have that. So you get to a place in your career where it's like, you have plateaued, or would you like to become the team leader? And most say, well, I think it's only natural that I become the team leader. That's what history has shown, that we want to become a leader, we get more money, et cetera, right? But then we give them the team leadership and we say, good luck. And the example that I attribute is, imagine having a Michelin star chef and then saying, hey, yeah, you've been a chef for a while. You want to make more money? It's time for you to run the restaurant. You can now be the manager of the restaurant. Well, the chef who's used to making fantastic food is now expected to be in charge of payroll and staffing and sourcing new glasses and plates and, doing the marketing. I mean, that's not a skill set they've ever done before. So why would we expect that they would be magically successful because they're a Michelin rated star, Michelin rated chef? And so I think that's the same approach here. And so for me, my coaching business helps those new leaders or people that want to transition into leadership to understand those soft skills. And things like, how do you create effective storytelling? How do you think strategic or build a strategic plan? How do you engage stakeholders at different levels? How do you manage your own boss in an environment where you're no longer just showing, hey, here's my code and how good it is. Now you're thinking, how do I manage my boss to help for them to help unlock things for me? And those are just skills that they don't learn as an individual contributor. And so for me, that's where I believe the gap is in this industry, is helping develop those softer skills, but I think more along the lines of just effective management and leadership.
Yeah, if I think back even to my own career, I just fell into data and fell into data management, and then was just sort of doing it. And obviously I wouldn't know what I didn't know. So I was probably making a lot of mistakes along the way. without real any guidance at all, just kind of floundering around and figuring out as I went along. But yeah, surely there's a more efficient, more effective way to do it if you had a little bit of understanding. Okay, you're going from, I don't know, senior data analyst to head of data analytics or something. Here's your current skill set that has served you well. Here's a myriad of new skills that you're going to need, maybe half of which you don't have at all. So like, how can we help you then get to that next stage? And in filling in those skills gaps, because a lot of them are not technical or largely not technical, how do your mentees, how do your clients fill in those gaps? Is that like through networking? Is it like, how do you help them navigate those gaps?
Yeah, I mean, the big part is having a lot of it is having a buddy that you can talk to. So part of what I offer from coaching, I've been at this for 18 years. I've been a leader now for over 12 of that space. I think so. For me, it's about a lot of the times they know the answer. They just need someone to bounce the idea off that isn't their peer. Most people don't want to go to their boss and say, "I don't know how to do this," and they don't go to their peers because their peers don't really understand what we do. So it's a completely different kind of sector, especially in a company where you may not have 4 or 5 data leaders. You might be the only data leader. So for me, it's about using coaching frameworks to ask questions so that they can come up with the answers themselves. Giving them some tips and insights from my own career. Again, not saying that what I do is right, but helping them navigate that and think about it from different perspectives. And the ones that often seek coaching or seek mentorship are often the ones that have growth mindsets and they're already thinking about it. They just need someone to validate that with and to kind of put that into play. And with soft skills, especially, you need a lot of repetitions. So a lot of the things that I do with my clients is, look, here's a framework. Here's how you might apply it. Go test it out, see how it feels. You may like it, you may not like it, and then come back and let's talk about how it went and what went well and what didn't go so well so that we can tweak it. Because every company has its own quirks, nuances. There's no one size fits all. Otherwise, we'd all read a book and we'd be expert managers. I think part of it is giving them the framework so that they can navigate different ambiguous challenges as they face them.
Pierre, as one final question, I'm wondering if you could ask our next guest one question. What question would that be?
I mean, to me, the question would be, it's very similar to what we talked about today. It's like, how do you know you've got the right candidate? Like, how do you know? And I think like even, every time I meet someone, like, they're great. And yeah, most of the time they are, but I don't know. Right. And so I'm always curious as how others are finding how to staff it and grow and develop. So for me, that'd be my question is, how do you know that you've got the right fit for you? I think that's what I would love to see.
Pierre, it's been a great conversation, wide ranging, very interesting. And thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it.